Hey friends and family. First, I'd like to begin by saying I think it would be ignorant of me to assume that the people I love and care about don't think differently than I do. We've all had our own unique life experiences that have formed us into who we are. As many of you know, I've spent a considerable amount of my life on the conservative side of the aisle, and in the latter parts of my life, the more progressive side. Even still, I'm certain there is much that I lack perspective on. I know we are currently living in a time of extremes where our arguments have become black and white, and it seems that we've forgotten the millions of complex parts of humanity that give it its colorful meaning. My hope is to provide some context to that complexity, but also to simplify some as well. So if you'll stay with me for a few minutes, there's a handful of topics I would love to address. Some impact me personally, some impact other parts of humanity that quite simply deserve to be acknowledged. I'm aware that the Black Lives Matter movement stirs up a lot of feelings for many, regardless of what side you choose to be on. Today, I'd like to share some facts and some considerations, as well as break down a couple of current topics surrounding the movement. Let's get into some statistics. Here's information on poverty by race in the United States from the census for 2019. Blacks represented 13.2% of the total population in the United States, just a little over 1 in 10, but 23.8% of the poverty population, which is nearly 1 in 4. In contrast, non-Hispanic whites were underrepresented in the poverty population, making up almost 60% of the total population, but only 41.6%, or 4 in 10 of the population in poverty. To break it down by race and not just total population, in 2019, the rate of poverty for blacks was 18.8%, and whites was just 7.3%. Poverty rates among blacks is more than double that for whites. There are several reasons for this. Here's a few more statistics. According to a survey completed by PayScale on 1.8 million workers between January 2017 and February 2019, black men earned 87 cents for every dollar the white men earned. Blacks are currently the lowest paid race in the United States. The statistics are even more dire for black women. Depending on education, black women on average earn 63 cents for every dollar the white man earns. One notable cause to this disparity is attributed to opportunity gaps, meaning less opportunity of positions with career growth, such as management, are not offered at the same rate as it is to white counterparts. I mentioned education, so let's talk a bit about that. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, outside of American Indians, blacks have the lowest high school graduation rate in the U.S. at 79%. Segregation has had lasting effects on the education of black Americans. Prior to the victory of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, schools for blacks were often in poor segregated neighborhoods. This was ongoing due to segregated housing laws to keep minorities separated from white neighborhoods. School funding, which is linked to property wealth, continues to remain low in these low-income neighborhoods. This housing segregation or redlining continued until the Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968. And I get it. It's easy to say, but Dominique, segregation was abolished over 50 years ago. It was, but that was less than one lifetime ago. Today's statistics I've shared from only the last 2 to 3 years demonstrate that the impact of segregation is still alive and well, as are our old mentalities. Consider that we've only had 50 years to adjust our mentalities on racism in our country that existed for over 400 years. The statistics indicate we aren't as far ahead as we think we are. And now just a couple statistics about the disparity in healthcare by race in the U.S. According to AmericanProgress.org, in 2017, 10.6% of blacks were uninsured compared with 5.9% of whites. In 2018, 8.7% of black adults received mental health services compared with 18.6% of white adults. And minorities are less likely to seek treatment due to the cost of service. And now, let's get into the topic of policing and crime by race in the U.S. Members of the black community are disproportionately targeted as criminals. Graphs are often posted on social media comparing hard numbers of white people arrested versus black people, arguing that blacks are not targeted because more whites are killed by police per year. Of course, the number of whites are higher because of what these numbers don't take into account is population ratio. Again, in the United States, blacks account for approximately 13% of the population. So when you compare these graphs, if equitable policing occurred, your graph should indicate a 14% or 1 in 10 ratio, but they don't. Blacks make up 22% or 1 in 4 of fatal police shootings, and whites, who make up a close to 60% of the US population, only account for 41% of fatal police shootings, which is 4 out of 10. Once again, whites are underrepresented and blacks are overrepresented. Let's talk incarceration rates. According to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, the U.S. prison population as of 2018 showed 34% of incarcerated males are Black, 29% are white, and 24% are Hispanic. Again, these numbers show a large disparity towards actual population ratios. Statistically, 1 in 3 Black men born in 2001 can expect to go to prison in their lifetime. How about sentencing durations from crime? According to the United States Sentencing Commission report from 2017, Black male offenders received sentences on average 19% longer than similarly situated white male offenders. Sentencing disparities between Black and white counterparts have been consistently reported for decades. Additionally, according to the Department of Justice, Black youth were 5 times more likely to be detained or committed compared to white youth. Black youth placement rates were 433 per 100,000 compared to a white youth placement rate of 86 per 100,000. A current and rather controversial topic is that of defunding the police. Just the phrase triggers many. I've seen it. Personally, this phrase is one that, although I align with, is difficult to say publicly because I am aware of the extreme misunderstanding of the concept. Defund the police is not saying get rid of the police. To defund the police, people are suggesting that instead of authorizing inflated budgets that militarize our police with high-priced technology, funds are appropriated to other causes that could better support particular situations that might require specialized training that police officers do not receive. The goal is to have community programs or resources such as mental health professionals available to answer calls of a distressed person. This way, an individual having a mental health episode gets the proper care and support and are not met with excessive force by police who might be ill-equipped to handle such a situation, resulting in the distressed person harmed or even dead, such as in the case of Daniel Prude. Additionally, the phrase and its concept are also personally controversial to discuss because so many of us, including myself, have family, friends, or loved ones who serve on the police force. My own uncle and cousin, who are LAPD, put their lives in danger regularly to keep their community safe, both working long hours in the midst of these protests. To say that I think they need less resources to do their jobs creates internal conflict and tension for myself. It is a complex web. Obviously, I want my family to remain safe while risking their lives daily. I also desire for others to get the proper care and treatment that they need to ensure they can live their best lives. Now, here's a recent story. You may have heard it. Breonna Taylor, killed in her own home in the middle of the night by those sworn to serve and protect her. A drug raid granted with a no-knock warrant supported by botched police work. No drugs were found, a life was taken, and no justice was served. As the parent, would that not be devastating to know that she was just a casualty in a mishandled drug bust? Would you be okay if her death was not even addressed at the sentencing of the police who completed the raid off of bad information? Wouldn't you want or even expect accountability? I have to believe that you would. I know that I would. Breonna Taylor is dead due to negligence, and she has no justice due to a flawed system. Her life mattered, and to so repetitiously deny that exposes the ongoing battle of racial injustice. Furthermore, the lack of accountability brings up another issue that deserves to be addressed in the near future: qualified immunity. Initially established in 1871 as part of the Civil Rights Act, also known as the Ku Klux Klan Act, to combat violence in the South after the Civil War, and evolving in 1983, the statute is judicially created doctrine that shields government officials from being held personally liable for constitutional violations such as the right to be free from excessive police force, for money damages under federal law, so as long as the officials did not knowingly violate clearly established law. Although well-intended for officials who have to make split-second decisions and to protect them in doing the best they can with the information available in the moment, the protections have at times deferred accountability from officers who have, in fact, and even intentionally, used excessive force. As one can imagine, this could be dangerous, as it also protects officers with bad intentions, poor judgment, and implicit bias that would prevent them from even seeking out the appropriate information to do their jobs properly, like in the case of Breonna Taylor. And in many other cases, resulting in laziness because there is possibility of no consequence. Discussions of reform have to be considered. I'd like to think that all of this is simple. Crime is crime, isn't it? Whether it's black on black, white on white, white on black, black on white, civilians on officers, officers on civilians, or even protesters turn rioters and looters. but it's not always that simple or straightforward. Additionally, crime and poverty rates are often linked in an ongoing vicious cycle. Highest crime rates are often linked to the poor zip codes, such as in Philadelphia, where 25% of their population is below the poverty line and crime is high. Moreover, the system is known to take minor offenses and turn them into criminal offenses, as we've already discussed in the disparity of sentencing terms and the overrepresented population of blacks in prison. So when those who are already poor can't afford expensive legal representation, having to serve time and then have felonies on their records, making it near impossible to find gainful employment, poverty leading to crime and crime leading to poverty becomes a vicious cycle. So where are we now? At this point, we've identified that blacks have the highest poverty rates in the US. They have the lowest educational funding and resources. They populate some of the poorest neighborhoods. They receive the lowest pay wages. They receive the longest prison sentences and are disproportionately killed by police. And they have the least amount of access to healthcare outside of Hispanics in the US. We can no longer deny that systemic racism resides in the United States of America, and it will only find its end when we take true ownership and push forward change. And to deny the existence of systemic racism and consequently uphold the inequities that allow the continuation of racial oppression to occur is white supremacy. Statistically, an immigrant who migrates to the US with any other color skin than black has a higher likelihood of success than a black American born and raised in our country. So when a black woman, Sandra Bland, is pulled over for a taillight and found dead in a jail cell days later, it should be questioned. When a black man, Ahmaud Arbery, is out for a jog and is murdered by 3 white men, it should be questioned. When Elijah McClain, a young black man, is walking home detained by police for looking sketchy, given a tranquilizer, and then dies after being taken into custody, it should be questioned. Something that U.S. history demonstrates to us is that whites have a history of oppressing black people. It should matter. These lives mattered. The Black Lives Matter movement is not a terrorist group. Yes, there are looters and rioters who have misrepresented, but the message still matters. The movement matters because systemic racism persists. More law and order is not going to solve this problem. It's an excessive overuse of the law that has gotten us here. We need change. We need new programs and resources that address these issues head on. We need more appropriate distribution of wealth and resources to low-income neighborhoods and schools. We need better healthcare systems to support underrepresented minorities. We need police funding or additional funding in general to be dispersed to sectors that support mental health and other community outreach and support. We need more voices to question what exists and legislation that will dismantle what's broken and replace it with equitable laws that proportionally support all walks of life. That is what the Black Lives Matter movement is asking, to truly support that all lives matter. We've all heard the analogies. If you go to a doctor with a broken arm, you will most likely walk right out of the doctor's office if he says to you, all bones matter. We need to address what's broken, but first, we need more people to acknowledge that things are broken. That doesn't mean we hate America. It doesn't mean we're saying that blacks are more important than whites. It doesn't mean we think police lives don't matter. It just means we want change, and because we are America, we should be the best example of equality to exist. We believe we can and should be better. That doesn't make us less American. Our current president claims he's done more for the black community than anyone else since Abraham Lincoln. But he tear-gassed peaceful protests in support of Black Lives Matter and then said it was in the name of God. That's not my God. My God supported the broken and the minorities, and that's not demonstrating law and order. That's terrorism. On top of that, his vice president refuses to even say the phrase out loud, Black Lives Matter. That's a problem. And back to the phrase of all lives matter. I have just a couple more things to break down, and with these I will get more personal. If all lives matter, how is repealing healthcare for all an appropriate response? Look, I know the Affordable Care Act is far from perfect. When my own mother, who has colitis, would rather get near death's door than to go to a doctor in the midst of a flare-up because her overpriced healthcare will still cause her to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket, I agree that something needs to change. So if all lives matter, let's find a way to cover all lives. We need to address our healthcare system. It's broken. Health insurance providers are greedy. Doctors are greedy. Pharmaceutical companies are greedy. We are the only first world country in the world where this is a problem. We need to address this. If other countries can figure this out, why can't the United States of America? The first iPhone wasn't tossed out, even though it would feel utterly useless in comparison to what exists now. It evolved, improved. The App Store was introduced. Processors and cameras were upgraded. Storage capacity increased. There was iterative progress. That's how things should be. And one more very personal issue for me regarding all lives matter. If all lives truly matter, then does my life matter? Many of you may not be aware of this, but I'm married to a woman. Surprise! And during this administration, I have observed my own rights and privileges be stripped away by a president going backwards on LGBTQ protections. Here are just a couple. On August 14, 2019, the Department of Labor announced a proposed rule that would radically expand the ability of federal contractors to exempt themselves from equal employment opportunity requirements, allowing for-profit and nonprofit employers to impose religious criteria on employees that could include barring LGBTQ employees. On September 19th, 2019, the Department of Health and Human Services canceled a plan to explicitly prohibit hospitals from discriminating against LGBTQ patients as a requirement of Medicare and Medicaid funds. On May 2nd, 2019, the Department of Health and Human Services published a final rule encouraging hospital officials, staff, and insurance companies to deny care to patients, including transgender patients, based on religious or moral beliefs. Thankfully, this vague and broad rule was immediately challenged in court, and to potentially appoint another ultra-conservative Supreme Court justice could continue to undo protections for me and my loved ones and many other incredible human beings. To support that is to go against me. To support that means that my life doesn't matter, which means all lives don't matter, period. That part is simple to me. You may need a new phrase, but I hope that you don't. I hope that you can realize the true weight and responsibility of your statement that all lives matter and adjust accordingly. I implore you to open your hearts, to get beyond yourself, beyond what your unique life looks like, beyond what impacts your wallet and your own security and comforts. I'm begging us to all get beyond the extremes, beyond the black and white, to understand the complexity and the beauty of the color and land in a place where love and all lives can coexist. Daily, I'm inspired by the next generation. They see possibilities. They're leading this, and the evolution will come eventually. Right now, we have an opportunity to choose our side of history, and the side of the oppressor is rarely the side that history books look upon favorably. So please, show us that all lives actually matter.